Greetings from the road. It is Monday, September the 21st, in the very eventful year of 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Well, first off, greetings at the equinox, or joy at equinox, or happy equinox, or however you want to call it. At about somewhere between 2 and 3 in the afternoon, Eastern Time in the United States, the seasons officially change, and the sun begins to descend into darkness until the solstice around Christmas time, and then, of course, returns. It's one of the cycles of the year. It's an important one. Frankly, we should have it as a national holiday like they do in many other countries around the world, but one could hope. Anyways, it's the change of the seasons. Summer is officially over and autumn is officially here, so enjoy the changing of the leaves if you're in the northern hemisphere, and enjoy the return of spring if you're in the southern hemisphere. The world continues to turn, and time marches on. Well, yesterday, like many millions of others, I spent a good amount of my afternoon watching the Charlie Kirk Memorial in Arizona. It was a massive gathering, although I wouldn't call it a funeral because I didn't see a casket anywhere. And frankly, as of this morning, I have heard nothing or seen nothing on the news about where this poor man is going to be buried or laid to rest. We'll see how that goes. Now, I'm not going to comment either way on the grief involved or the people that are followers of the late Mr. Kirk, but it has to be pointed out that 2 weeks ago he was just part of the landscape, and now he's been elevated to the level of Christian martyr. And although I have had the greatest respect for the man, I do have to point out that an awful lot of manipulation is going on right now. And for not just those that were fans of his, but those that weren't. I thought that the memorial service, was rather unconventional. You want to compare it to that of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, or anyone else for that matter. I do want to point out that when President Trump did step on the stage, I think the sparklers were a little bit much, but again, I come from another century, so I'm not really sure what to make of the way people do things these days. It was interesting, but at the same time, it's not going to change things much. If anything, you're going to see the United States become more divided, not less. And that's sad because Mr. Kirk did so much to try to bring people together. The guy never yelled at anybody. You ever notice that? He never really got upset at one of these events he went to. The real tragedy is that this guy died at age 31. And it's no doubt he would have changed some of his views on things, matured in some ways, and gained even more and more wisdom. If you want to see how well he can debate, I would look up the time he was at the Oxford Student Union. That's a classic. If there's anything that he does inspire people to do, though, whether they be Christians or not, and there are many people in the United States who are not, well, what I would hope is that the need for rhetoric, the need to be able to learn a lot of things. He never went to university, and he's an example that education is training one's mind, not stuffing one's memory or passing exams or vomiting back what a leftist professor tells you to vomit back. No, he's going to be missed, but let's hope there are many more like him of his generation. If that's the case, there's still hope. And speaking of domestic politics, Antifa is now a terrorist organization. Finally! Wow, that took some time, 10 years or more? Yeah, finally, it's a terrorist organization, a domestic terrorist organization. And that being said, and considering the fact that many members of that organization, which does exist, in spite of what many leftists like to think, well, quite simply, folks, a lot of people in schools, I've known of school teachers who are in that, people in business, people in high tech, a lot of those. Yeah, well, now that it's officially a terrorist organization, I have to ask the question quite sincerely, and I'm going to do some research on this. If you run across these people, can you just shoot them? They're terrorists. They're a physical threat to the United States. So if you run across these black-clad vegans walking down the street screaming death to America, can you just take out your firearm and blow them away? Is that legal? Really, I've never had to deal with that sort of thing before, so I'm sincerely asking. And if anyone has any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. But it's a step in the right direction. Years late, and what are they going to actually do about it? We'll see. Now, in the same light, there are now warnings, credible threats coming out that there are many, 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 many sleeper cells in the United States for places for organizations like Al Qaeda and the usual bad actors. They came in through Canada and through Mexico, of course. There's no surprises there, but this is coming from some official sources that as we enter we're back to the school year, and as we enter the sports season, be on the lookout. There are many enemies of the United States. This is why the concept of civil war, in spite of so many people rooting for it, don't know what they're talking about, because if the Americans ever go at each other, the rest of the world that hates us is not going to sit idly by and just watch. They're going to jump in on it. So let's be a little practical here and a little bit American for a change, shall we? We have serious threats we're facing. And one could hope that people would come together if we are threatened from without, or more likely from within. But let's wait. Let's wait and watch, shall we say. Now, back to the Middle East. Recognition of Palestine. Oh, look at all these countries that are recognizing a Palestinian state. Isn't that nice of them? Well, I'm sorry to have to point this out, but that's 50 years too late. There really isn't much left to recognize. Gaza's a mess. The West Bank is virtually gone. All the, I have to say, intelligent leaders of the Palestinian people are long dead. Really, 50 years ago, look at who was heading up the Palestinian movement back then. Educated, and it was also quite secular. That's not generally known. There were a lot of Christian Palestinians that were part of the movement at the time. No, they're coming to the party late. It's like firemen showing up at a fire when everything's already burned to the ground. It sounds nice. It makes people feel good, but there's nothing left to recognize. The Israelis won. Doesn't matter if you're pro-Israel or anti-Israel, you're pro-Palestine or anti-Palestine. They won. They took over, and they're still doing that. So all of these brave Western countries that are now coming to the rescue and recognizing the Palestinians as a sovereign people, well, you're pretty late to the party, guys. I'm sorry to have to point that out, but that's reality. And most people are into theories as opposed to what's actually practiced. It'll be interesting to see what effect that has, but there are no decent people heading up the Palestinians anymore. So there isn't anybody to recognize. I'm sorry, but it's sad, it's tragic. But if you've been around as long as I have, and you've followed the news as long as I have, you've seen how things have gone. since the 1960s and 70s and into the 80s, and, well, it's not just a lost cause, it's a vanished one. Okay, and on this, as I continue my journey on the road, I'm going to leave you with one more thing, and this is something that should also not get lost in the shuffle, and that is the plight of South Africans. And I don't mean just white South Africans or Afrikaners. There are other ethnic groups there that are not part of the majority black operation that's running that country, namely the African National Congress, which is an affront to humanity as well as the entire African continent. There are white Africans around the continent, and in some places they're treated pretty well. But they're going to be, all I'm going to say is this, they're going to be continued to be genocided. Charlie Kirk, to his credit, pointed that out and made a issue of it. We need more people of his bravery to step forward and say, yeah, these people who have been there and are arguably indigenous, and I mean that. The Boers settled a part of Africa that no human being had ever been before. And they did that 400 some years ago. That makes them indigenous. Humans have got to stop treating each other with inhumanity. And a great place to start this trend is South Africa. The Trump administration, to its credit, wants to give refugee status to these people. That is not going as smoothly as it should. And that's something that once Congress gets back in session after its current break, you ever notice how often Congress goes on breaks, really? But when it gets back into session, maybe they can start dealing with this. The South African people, both black and white, have been allies of the United States, or were allies of the United States through several wars. And if you've met them in real life, not theorized them like so many Americans like to do, but met them in real life, gotten to know people from that continent in real life, you'll see that they're pretty decent human beings. But the African National Congress, which is Marxist, communist, run by the most corrupt band of criminals that's ever occupied the southern part of that continent, well, they're beginning to sense that people are catching up with what they've been up to. Genocide does not mean putting people into camps and killing them, by the way. I'm going to point this out. Go to the United Nations website, very easy to find, un.org, and type in genocide. You will see their definition. And that applies to what's going on down there. And I'm really sick to hell of people getting in touch with me saying it's not true. It is. It's an inconvenient truth. Very inconvenient to some people. Now, in closing, I want to point something out here. We're entering the colder weather, which means riots and civil unrest are not going to be as easy in the northern hemisphere as it usually is in the summer and the spring. But the United States is getting more divided, much more divided. And Charlie Kirk's passing, of course, has not helped any. But perhaps, we can take this tragedy and become alchemists and take the lead and turn it into some sort of gold. He left a wonderful example for the men and women of his generation. And that is that education is something that you choose. It's not something you go off and spend a lot of borrowed money on to get so you can get a nice job. This guy was quite capable. And although he appears to be unique right now, I promise you there are thousands of potential Charlie Kirks out there here in the United States that can become just as effective, if not more so. The only thing that has to be done is they have to be found They have to be supported. And on their part, they have to realize what they can do. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies. It really gets to them sometime. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. It's available elsewhere where all podcasts can be found. And at Substack, I can be reached at aureliancolumn.substack.com. And please consider a paid subscription. It does help keep things moving. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember Clown World, the Deep State, and all enemies of the United States, both foreign and especially domestic, must be destroyed. Good day.